everyone, welcome or welcome back. My name is Yuna, and I hope that you have taken some time in this past week to take a breath, to relax, do something that just makes you feel good and calm because life has been rocking me. I am so tired. I'm so exhausted from 1,000 different things, and I feel like sometimes we just need to remind ourselves that rest is not something you have to earn. It is your animal right to rest whenever you need it. Take your mental, emotional, physical well-being seriously. And I'm gonna try and take my own advice because I sure have not been resting enough. So you and me together, we're gonna do some self-care and make sure that we are feeling good in our bodies and our minds and our souls so that we can read as many books as possible. Alright, I know that was a wacky segue, forgive me, but today I'm going to be doing part 2 of my recommending AANHPI books and authors because it is May. It is May, which means it is AANHPI Heritage Month, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month. I did part 1 of this video last week where I shared some books that I wanted to recommend and some books that are on my TBR from certain regions. I focused on South Asia, Southeast Asia, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander books and authors because I just want to say, I know I said in the last video, but I'm going to repeat myself, AANHPI covers such a huge range of countries and cultures and regions, and I think that, honestly, they should probably break it out into multiple months and not just squish all of us together into May, but whatever. Even if we're just looking at the Asian American Asia portion of AANHPI, that is a huge area, right? That's Asia. Asia is the biggest continent. It has 50 something countries and it has many distinct regions with very different cultures and mythologies and storytelling traditions. So I just wanted to make sure that when I was doing these recommendation lists, I was showing you the different areas and making sure that I hit all the different regions in giving my recommendations. I'm Korean American, so of course I appreciate the Korean rep in literature, but I feel like a lot of times when you get recommendations for Asian American authors, you see those lists heavily dominated by Korean or Japanese authors, and while, they're amazing authors and amazing books coming from those countries, there are just so many other places that we could also be reading from. So I wanted to try to make sure that I had a good diversity, a good representation across the board. I said this in part 1, I'm going to repeat myself. There's no way in these 2 videos that I'm going to hit every single country that falls under the rubric of AANHPI, and so I just don't want, if you are from a country that is not represented in one of these videos, please don't take it personally, and please don't think that it means that I haven't or don't plan to or don't want to read from those countries. It's really just, it's just like logistics. I can't talk for that long and I can't cover all of the countries, but definitely leave your recommendations with any books or authors from any of the countries or regions in the comments. I'm always trying to read diversely and trying to read from countries that I haven't read from, and I am particularly trying to read more translated fiction this year and just like moving forward. So if you have any recommendations for translated works from any of the countries that would fit into the AANHPI umbrella, definitely leave them in the comments below, please and thank you. Another disclaimer that I already gave in part 1, but I want to repeat here, is that some of these books are not necessarily my absolute favorites. They might be books that I enjoyed or gave like 3 stars to, but I feel like even if it's a book that I didn't love, there's going to be someone out there who's going to really connect with that book. So I still want to recommend books even if they're not my absolute favorite, but I'll let you know for sure the ones that resonated specifically with me. And I'm not going to recommend you any books that I absolutely did not enjoy or I think that are really weak or problematic. Absolutely not. But some of these books might not be my absolute favorites, but I still think that they are worth someone else picking up. So today I'm going to be finishing us out with East Asia and Southwest Asia. I have a ton of books to get through, so I'm going to be trying to do a bunch of these like rapid fire, or if I've talked about them in other videos, I'll just kind of point you to the other videos so that I can hopefully get through all of these books without losing my voice and in a reasonable amount of time. I'm going to start us off with East Asia, and just like in the last video, I'm going to put a map up on the screen so you can get an idea of what countries I'm talking about when I talk about a specific region. And I feel like a little bit of a hypocrite because I know I literally just said that a lot of these recommendation lists end up being disproportionately dominated by Korean or Korean and Japanese authors, but I'm going to beg your forgiveness because I have a lot of books by Korean authors to share, and that is because I am Korean, and so I love to read from my culture, I love to read from my people. So forgive me if it seems like I'm contributing to the problem that I just named, but hopefully I'm balancing out with the other recommendations, and I will get a little bit of grace from you guys because I do want to hype up my people. If you want some translated Korean fiction and you enjoy kind of strange, almost detached, but still really striking prose, then I might suggest that you try out Hangang. Hangang is a really interesting author to me because I do love a lot of her works, but her writing style isn't necessarily one that I really enjoy the experience of reading. It's actually quite opposite to what I generally prefer. I usually like very emotive and descriptive and evocative writing, and Hangang is not that. She is quite unadorned and crisp and almost clinical at times, and it's hard to tell with translated fiction sometimes if that's the author's writing style coming through, or if some things are lost in translation, or some things just come across the type of way once translated. I find that I have that issue a lot with translated fiction that has been translated from Korean. I think that Korean is actually such a beautiful and descriptive and can be a very emotional language, and yet when I read translated fiction, most of the time it reads pretty dry. So I have a sense that there is something that is generally lost in translation in terms of the emotional impact, but I think that Hangang is intentionally a bit reserved in her writing style and a bit more straightforward. But yeah, it's just hard to tell to what extent it is all her and how much of it is translated. I think that Hangang is probably most famous for her book The Vegetarian, which won the Pulitzer Prize? Pulitzer Prize? I never know if it's Pulitzer or Pulitzer, whatever, you know what I mean, the big prize. This is a really bizarre story about a woman who has a dream and then decides to go cold turkey vegan, like she's not eating any more meat, and she starts to behave in increasingly strange ways. It's a story that's told in multiple points of views of the people around her, but you never actually get her point of view, so you never know what's actually happening in her head. You don't get any insight into her psyche. It's all just told based on the perception of the people around her. This book touches on things like autonomy, bodily autonomy, the perception of women in society, expectations of women in society. And while it is a powerful story, and I understand why it got that prize and why it is so hyped up, it isn't necessarily my personal favorite of hers. Another book of hers that I've read and I don't hear talked about very often is The White Book. I'm pretty sure this was shortlisted for the Booker Prize, and this is another really interesting book. It is a plotless, kind of disjointed, autobiographical narration and meditation on the death of the narrator's younger sister, who died as a newborn only like a couple hours, I think, after she was born. The book has a pretty unconventional structure, and what it does is it uses the color white and these short meditations on different white items as a way to discuss things like grief and loss and the fragility of human life. Kang talks about 65 different white items, and those range from things like rice to milk and I think like diapers or some sort of cloth. So she talks about a bunch of different items that are all white, and this is the vehicle through which she's talking about the grief and loss of her younger sister. This is a pretty short read from what I remember, and I really liked it. I think that this was one of those scenarios in which her sort of clean, straight, clinical writing style was very purposeful, and you can see the emotion come through even without her being a very emotive writer. All that brings me to my personal favorite book of Hangang's, and that is Human Acts. I think I talked about this in part 1 or part 2 of my favorite short books video, and like I said, this is my favorite book of hers, and it covers the events and immediate to long-lasting aftermath of the Gwangju uprisings. The Gwangju uprisings were these student-led demonstrations that were very violently put down by the government, and there's no exact number, but people suspect that thousands of people were killed in this uprising. The book has 7 or 8 chapters, I can't remember exactly, but it follows the events from like immediately after the uprising all the way to many years after, and in each chapter we follow a different point of view, so we see how the events have affected different people in different ways at different times. I thought this was a really powerful story, and it had a really big emotional impact for me, which I think is that much more impressive and effective because Hangang in this book really refused to glorify or romanticize suffering or pain or death. She is quite clinical in the way that she describes some of these horrible things, and yet the horror still shines through. And I think for me that was what was so effective about her writing style for this particular book, and it probably is why it's my favorite. Alright, if you want a sweeping, multi-generational, multi-decade family drama about Koreans and the Korean experience in Japan, then you know that I'm going to recommend to you Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. I just raved about this book on my wrap-up video, I think for April, so I'm not going to go too deeply into it, but if you want to hear my full thoughts, then definitely check that video out. I'll link it in the description, like in the card or something. I love this book. This time around, it was a reread for me. I read this book for the first time, like, I don't know, like 7, 8, some number of years ago, and I had pretty much forgotten all of it, so I was very happy to reread it and have what felt like a fresh experience. Like I said, this is a multi-generational family drama, and it is very much character driven. There's not a whole lot of a driving plot. It is very much about this family and the family members and how they live their lives and try to survive and just try to make it over the course of many years while there are all of these world events happening. It's about the immigrant experience, it's about family, it's about sacrifice, it's about identity, it's about legacy. One thing I really appreciate about this book is that even though it doesn't go into it in too much detail and really doesn't dramatize it, it does talk about the very dark history between Japan and Korea, which I think most people or many people don't know about. So I'm just gonna take a second to talk about it because I gotta. If it's something that you haven't heard of, then I suggest you look into it a bit because it's something that I don't think enough people are educated on. But Japan has a very dark history of war crimes like medical experimentation, forcing hundreds of thousands of women into sexual slavery, murder, rape civilians, and they colonized and oppressed and abused so many countries while they were trying to expand, and that includes Korea, where they forced people to give up their Korean names, forced them to only speak in Japanese, all of that stuff. And not a lot of people learn about this or know about this, and I think that is partially because Japan as a country has had one of the most successful international rebrands that I've ever seen. Most people now, when they think about Japan, they think about things like cozy Ghibli things, that aesthetic, or anime, Pokemon. And while, listen, I love all of those things too, I think it is still really important to be aware of the history and to be aware of the things that a government is trying to divert attention from or trying to cover up and not talk about. And again, Pachinko isn't about that. It isn't necessarily about that history, but the lives of the family members and the events that we see take place happen with that as the backdrop. And so I definitely appreciated that. And I would say that this book would be great for people who love a character-driven story, again, who love multi-generational stories. And the writing style for this is kind of similar to Hangang, where there is no frou-frou. There's no excessive descriptions. The author isn't going to beg you to feel anything about these characters. The author doesn't make any of the characters overly emotional, but she still manages to write one of the most emotionally impactful stories that I've read. And of course, some of that is personal bias because I'm Korean. And so obviously I'm going to connect to the story in a type of way. But I think that it is a story that can touch a lot of people, and I would highly, highly recommend you check it out. Alright, the next one is for my Charlotte's Web animal lovers, novella lovers out there, and that is The Hen Who Dreamed She Could Fly by Sun Mi Hwang. This is another Korean translated book, and it is a short little guide, but I love this book so much. I didn't even know what it was about. I just saw it on someone's Pango page, I'm pretty sure, and I picked it up. This is a short and impactful, almost like fable-like story, and I see it get compared to things like Charlotte's Web, but this one I would argue is a bit more adult than Charlotte's Web. Like, while the story is about animals and it is told in this sort of fairy tale fable way, it has some dark material that's delivered in a way that I think leans slightly more adult than some of the stuff that happens in something like Charlotte's Web. This is about a hen named Sprout, there she is, and she is a hen who is kept for laying eggs, and she decides, I want to be free of this. I don't want to be in a cage anymore. I don't want to have someone constantly taking my eggs away from me. I want to get out of here, lay an egg, and actually raise a baby. So it's about her going after this dream of motherhood and family and community, and it's a really, really beautiful story, but it is very heartbreaking, and like I said, there is some dark content that happens in here, but I would recommend to pretty much anybody because, once again, it's really short, it's really impactful, and if you can, pick up the physical book because there are, let me speak about it, there are illustrations in it. I'm not sure if the lights are gonna like wash this out, but there are really cute illustrations that are scattered throughout the book, so highly recommend this if you're someone who enjoys emotional stories that are told with animals. I think it's just such a lovely story about identity and family and community and sacrifice. And again, it's so short, you can get through it in honestly like a day. So highly recommend pick this up and get a physical copy if you can because the illustrations are so stinking cute. I don't know how I'm doing, but I'm trying my best to get through these kind of quickly because like I said, I have so many books to get through. So apologies if I seem like I am rushing through these. I am a little bit. Now I'm going to recommend two books that are also by Korean authors, but these are, I believe, middle grade. I'm pretty sure I either read them while I was in middle school or elementary school. So obviously it's been quite a while since I've read them, so I can't really confidently vouch for them, but I remember that when I read them, I thought they were so good, and they were probably the first books that I had read since moving to America that were about Korea and featured Korean experiences and Korean characters. So I distinctly remember being really excited about that. So although again I can't vouch for the quality of the writing necessarily, because it's been so long since I read them. I still want to talk about them. Both books are by Linda Sue Park. The first one is Single Shard, and the second one is When My Name Was Keiko. When My Name Was Keiko, I have at my parents' house, and I just didn't have time to go get it before filming this video. And A Single Shard, I have lost the dust jacket sometime in the last like 2 decades, but I wish you could see because the cover is so beautiful. It's made with what looks like traditional pressed Korean paper, and there's a crane emblem that's like pressed into it. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it with the lights, but I don't know, it's kind of there. A Single Shard is about a young orphan boy named Tree Ear, and he ends up apprenticing for this master potter named Min, who has a very bad temper. It's about his journey learning about all the steps that go into becoming a potter or making a single piece of pottery, from finding the right mud and digging it out to all that follows, and he ends up going on this journey with this single shard of Min's beautiful pottery to present it. And it's just, from what I remember, I had such a great time. Even though it's been so long since I've read this book and I don't remember specifics of the plot, I still remember the feeling of reading what the mud felt like between his fingers and his toes. I still remember the feeling I got when she described the color of the pottery. So yeah, it had a really big impact on me. And actually, now that I'm talking about it, I feel like I should reread this. It's a short book. It's only like, yeah, it's like 150 pages and it has a big ass font, so I could probably get through this in a day. So actually, I've decided I'm going to reread this, and I'm probably going to end up wanting to reread When My Name Was Keiko. Now, My Name Was Keiko follows two siblings. There's a girl named Sunhee and her brother Taeyun. They're growing up during the Japanese occupation when Japan is trying to colonize Korea, and they are forcing all Korean citizens to give up their Korean names and take on new Japanese names and identities. As the title suggests, Sunhee is forced to take the name Keiko, and it's about her and her brother and their different perspectives and their experiences during this time and with these new names and what all of this means. I remember less of this book than I do A Single Shard, but like I said, I'm feeling inspired to do a reread, so I'll probably end up doing that in like the next couple months. So I'll do that and come back and let you guys know what I think rereading these middle grade books as adults. The next book I want to recommend is for those of you who like very dark and eerie and descriptive poetic writing and maybe enjoy horror and young adult stories. You may have guessed that I'm talking about And the River Drags Her Down by Cheon Yoon. I talked about this book in my favorite young adults books video, I think it was a couple months ago now, and this is still one of my favorite YA books I've ever read, definitely one of the favorite ones that I've read in recent years. This is about a young girl named Sujin who comes from a family of women who have this mysterious power to bring back things from the dead with a body part. And Sujin, her older sister, drowned about a year ago, and she ends up in her loneliness and in her grief bringing her sister back, but her sister comes back kind of changed, kind of dark, kind of different. I think it's such a beautiful and eerie and atmospheric horror story that talks about grief, that talks about letting go, that talks about generational trauma, all of these things. And Jiyeon is originally a poet. I also have one of her poetry collections, and you can really tell in her writing style. It is, again, so beautiful, so descriptive, so lyrical. So if you enjoy horror, if you enjoy YA, even if you don't enjoy YA, I would highly recommend this because I don't think this reads YA in the way that people mean negatively a lot of the time. I think that it has a lot of subtlety. It has a lot of believable character motivations. I think it has a lot of unique ways that it incorporates Korean mythology and Korean traditions into the story. So, love this book. Highly recommend. All right, thank you so much for letting me carve out a bit of time to talk about some of my favorite Korean authors and Korean books, but I'm going to move on from Korea now. This next book that I have to recommend is a very recent read. I only read this last month, but if you are into horror and you like the meeting of supernatural horror and historical horror or real life horror, then obviously I'm going to recommend you pick up Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zhang by Kylie Lee Baker. I'm going to keep it quick because I have multiple videos where I've talked about this book at length. I have the vlog and I have the monthly wrap-up. This book follows the main character Cora Zhang after her sister is killed in an act of racial violence during the peak years of COVID. This is a really great horror story that has a very emotional heart and is looking at things like isolation, community, racial violence. And I think it really expertly balances supernatural horror with some real world shit like racism and again violence. So yeah, if you are into any of that, I highly recommend you pick up Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zhang. She has another book out that I want to pick up, or it's releasing soon or it has just released, and it's called Japanese Gothic. I'm not entirely sure what the premise is about. I don't know if it's a haunted house type of situation, but I think that there are two people who are living in different time periods and they're having a similar sort of haunting or similar haunted experience, something like that. But whatever it is, I really loved this book, so I'm going to pick it up and give it a shot. All right, do you want some bizarre literary fiction that blends body horror and sci-fi and social commentary? Then you should definitely try out Ling Ling Huang. Ling Ling Huang is not only an author, but she's a really accomplished violinist. She's played with several like professional orchestras, I think including like the Oregon Symphony and Grand Teton Symphony or something like that. But yeah, she is also a professional violinist. I've read Natural Beauty, which I've talked about on my channel, and this is a book that follows a violin prodigy, which makes a lot of sense given, again, Ling Ling Huang's background. So this is about a former violin prodigy who starts working at this strange holistic wellness and beauty company in order to pay for some of the care for her parents. And while she is working there, things get really bizarre. Things go off the rails, and there is a lot of commentary on Eurocentric beauty standards, on the exploitation of women of color, assimilation, toxic relationships, toxic beauty, a whole bunch of stuff. And yeah, again, like I said, if you like things to get a little funky, really bizarre, and for there to be some body horror in your literary fiction, then definitely check out Natural Beauty. I had a great time with this, and it's not a very long book. It's under 300 pages, but woo! Shit goes down. I also have Immaculate Conception, which is her more recent book, and I haven't read this yet. I'm gonna get to it at some point. But this is another, I think, like sci-fi dystopian book set in a very tech-heavy near future. This features two women who are artists and have a very toxic and competitive relationship. And I think that this is supposed to talk about, again, like toxic relationships and the toxic nature of the art industry or the art world. I might be shooting a little bit in the dark, but I'm pretty sure that's the general premise, and I've heard a lot of people say that they like this even more than Natural Beauty, or at least as much as Natural Beauty, so I will definitely be getting to this in the near future. Next, I'm going to recommend one of my favorite authors, and I feel like I don't talk about her enough on this channel. I mentioned her in my favorite books of 2025 video, I think back in January, and I don't think I've talked about her since. Do you want urban fantasy, or are you looking for cinematic action? Do you want complex characters and complicated relationships and a series with some of the most satisfying character arcs I have ever read? Then please, I am begging you to pick up the Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee. The Greenbone Saga is a trilogy. It's Jade City, Jade War, and the last book, Jade Legacy. This madness. I'm gonna get to that series, trust me, but I want to first talk about another book that she wrote. It's a shorter book in case you want to get just a taste of what Fonda Lee can do. She has a high fantasy novella called The Untethered Sky, which I did enjoy. It felt really epic and had great world building for being such a short story. It has fantastical creatures like these big birds named rocks, there's manticores, and it is a fun story, but I think that part of the power of Fonda Lee's writing is her ability to seed these ideas or character traits and then build them out or turn them on their heads over the course of a longer book, like in the Greenbone Saga. Now, the Greenbone Saga is funny because it is a series that, based on its description and even just like based on the covers, is not something that would generally appeal to me at all. But I picked up this book because so many people rave about this series, and I get it. I get the hype. I understand. This is an urban fantasy. It's pretty low on the fantasy, but it's kind of like Godfather meets Hong Kong gangster movies meets martial art. This series has some of the best characters and character arcs and relationships I've ever read. The trilogy follows different members of the Call family over several decades, and the Call family is one of two main clans that unofficially run this island called Kekon. Now, Kekon is special because it's a place where you can mine a stone called jade, and it gives certain people who are compatible with it these superhuman powers. In the beginning, it focuses mainly on three siblings from the Call family, and you see how they develop, how their relationships develop with each other and with other people. And it's just so juicy. Fonda Lee's writing is so tight and crispy, and her pacing is really intentional. These are three pretty thick books. I think the first book is like over 500 pages and they only get longer. And there are points where I know some people feel like the books might have dragged a little bit because a lot does happen, but I think that the pacing is overall really, really well done. There's a lot of tension, there's a lot of drama, there's a lot of twists and turns. Fonda Lee is herself a martial artist, so she really taps into that when she's writing some of these fight scenes, and you can just see what is happening. You can see the limbs flying, you can see the jumps, you can see the twists. It's just so good. While there is a lot of action and there is this light fantasy element, the heart of the story, like I've been alluding, is definitely the characters, and Woo! The characters are so complicated and messy and messed up. There's so much love and history between them and respect, but also sometimes resentment. When I think of morally gray or questionable characters that I still love and root for and would defend, Hilo is very high up on that list for me. If you know, you know. I feel like I may never read another story quite like this with this type of scope and with this impact. And I'm so sad about that. But I think that in another year or two, I'll probably reread this trilogy because, God, it is so good. And yeah, I haven't found another series quite like this. So if you know of one, please recommend below. The first two books are obviously incredible, but for me, the third book, where we see some of these storylines wrap up and we see where a lot of these characters end up towards the end of their lives or just while they are adults. Oh my God, I cried. All right, please read the Greenbone Saga. I'm gonna stop rambling about it because again, I'm trying to keep these short, but I will talk a little bit about her new book that is coming out or has just released. I can't keep track of these release dates, but I think it's releasing soon if it hasn't already, and the new book is The Last Contract of Isako. I'm pretty sure this has been described as a samurai space opera. Isako is this legendary swordswoman and she has reached, I think, the end of her career and she is just hoping to retire and fade off into the distance. But she gets presented or saddled with this one final mission that she can't turn down, and I think that this mission ends up taking her on this crazy adventure. I'm pretty sure this is standalone and isn't supposed to be part of a longer series, which breaks my heart just a little bit because I love standalones, but I'm so hungry for another epic series from Fonda Lee, but I will take whatever she can put out. So as soon as I can, I will get my hands on The Last Contract of Isako. Now I want to talk about some of the books I have on my TBR that are from the East Asian authors. I have a bunch of these, so I'm going to try and rapid fire. I keep saying this, but I'm going to really try to rapid fire through these. These are not going to be in-depth or anything, but just to give you an idea of some of the things I have on my TBR. First, I have If I Had Your Face by Frances Cha. This, I think, is a debut novel, and I think it's translated. I can't remember if it's translated or written in English, but either way, it's a debut novel and it's set in South Korea and follows 4 different young women as they're trying to navigate the crazy impossible beauty standards in Korea and navigate all those things while living in a society where plastic surgery is pretty routine. It sounds like it could be very infuriating and interesting. Next, I have a series that I mentioned in my priority TBR for 2026 video, and that is the Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu. This is supposed to be silk punk fantasy, and I don't really know much about the plot, but I have heard that the world building and character work is so good that the page count is worth it because these are some chunky books. I think that the last couple books are 1,000 pages or over 1,000 pages, and they're big books and there's 4 of them. So I really hope it's worth it because I want to get through these, and I'm going to be a little pissed if I put in that many hours and at the end of it, it doesn't feel worth it. But I've heard nobody whose tastes I generally align with say that the series wasn't worth it, and I've heard that it has really well written female characters. I think most people say that the second book is their favorite. I've heard insane praise for the second book. So at some point in this year, I will try to get to the Dandelion Dynasty. A nonfiction book that I have on my list is Crying in H Mart. I have had this recommended to me so many times and I've been putting it off a bit, but this is a memoir about the author and her like complicated relationship with her mother and her grieving process after her mother passes. I've heard people say that this one will F me up and that I will be crying. I feel like just based on the premise, yes, I will probably be broken by this book, which is partially why I've been putting it off. But you know what? Hurt me, F it, I'm ready. Next is a book that I'm really excited to read, and that is Honey in the Wound by Ji-young Han. This is a book that I hadn't heard of until recently, and this is a debut novel, a lyrical and suspenseful debut novel about a mysteriously gifted Korean family confronting the brutality of the Japanese Empire. Honey in the Wound is an epic tale of survival and the reclamation of power. So from what I'm understanding, it's about a Korean family with these magical abilities during the Japanese occupation, and I'm not sure if it's more magical realism or if there are actual fantastical elements that take place, but I think that the main character, or the character that we follow for at least a chunk of the book, has the power to infuse cooking with her emotions, which I'm wondering if that's part of what the honey is alluding to. But you know what? I love families that have intergenerational trauma, that have family dynamics, that have elements of magical realism or fantasy and Korean history. I'm sad. I can't wait to get to this. All right, the last book I'm going to talk about on my TBR for this region is going to be The Young Will Remember by Eve Chung. I think that's a really interesting premise. I mean, obviously the premise of being stuck behind enemy lines isn't anything new, but I've never read about, you know, a Chinese correspondent during the Korean War. That's something that I don't think I've even heard of being written about. So I'm definitely interested in picking this up, and as with all of these other books on my TBR, I will get to it as soon as I can. Alright, that is a wrap for East Asia. Obviously, there are a million other books that I could talk about and rave about, but we're going to move on to Southwest Asia. I feel like different sources either refer to this as West Asia or Southwest Asia. I'm going to use Southwest Asia, but again, I'll put a map on the screen so you know what I'm talking about. I'm going to start us off with one of my favorite books from 2025. This was such a powerful read. I highly recommend to you Against the Loveless World by Susan Abalawa. This book follows the main character, a Palestinian woman named Nard, and when the book opens, she is actually narrating her story from solitary confinement in an Israeli prison. I love Nard. She is this foul-mouthed, sharp, witty woman who was born to Palestinian parents who were displaced in Kuwait, and over the course of her life, she ends up on a journey that eventually brings her back to Palestine. It's about her life, it's about the people she meets, it's about the community she makes, it's about the things she risks and the things she cares about, and it really is such a powerful story, and the end of this book made me weep. I highly recommend this book, and I definitely do want to pick up more by Susan Abalawa. She has a book called Morning in Jenin, which I can't remember if I already put that on hold in the library or not, but if I haven't, again, I will get to it at some point and I'll put it somewhere on the screen so you can see the cover. The second book that I want to recommend by a Palestinian author is one that I have lent out to a friend, so I don't have it with me physically. I do own it, but it is on loan to a friend. That is Minor Detail by Adania Shibli. This is such a powerful little novel. It is a novella and it hits like a freaking bullet. It is so small, but the punch. It is one of those books that for me was so uncomfortable to read, and yet it is a book that really should be read carefully, and you should be paying attention to the details like the title suggests. So in that way, it is a book that makes you uncomfortable but insists that you sit with that discomfort and pay attention. This novella is broken into two parts, and the first part follows a real-life event that happened in 1949 when Israeli soldiers raped and murdered a young Bedouin girl. The second part of the book fast forwards to closer to modern day, and it follows a woman in Ramallah who is investigating this event and is kind of obsessed with uncovering what happened, partially because her birthday is the same day that this murder happened, and she ends up going to the site of the event and we sort of see what happens. And ooh, it's such a great, sharp, incisive little book, and I think that everyone should give this book a chance, even if it's not necessarily something that you would normally reach for. Next, I have a recommendation by an Iranian American author, and he is originally a poet, and I just love when poets write novels because I think that you can really tell. That is Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. I feel like this book is so beloved on the internet and you see it recommended all the time, and there is definitely a reason for it. This book follows a queer Iranian American poet named Cyrus, and he's a recovering alcoholic who is obsessed with martyrs and the idea of martyrdom. Cyrus is searching for meaning in his life as a recovering alcoholic, and he, through a series of events, ends up connecting with this terminally ill painter, this artist. Through these interactions, he uncovers a bunch of secrets about his family, learns about his family history. It's a really stunning and energetic but melancholy look at things like displacement and queerness and art and addiction and grief and legacy. It's funny, it hasn't been that long since I read this book. Maybe it's been like a year or a year and a half, but the details of it are actually a bit fuzzy. So maybe in the next year or so I'll end up doing a reread, but I highly recommend if you like reading books written by poets, if you want to read about, again, like addiction, grief, family, connection, meaning, art, all of that stuff. If any of that sounds interesting to you, then I would definitely suggest you give this a chance. It's not even that long. It's like it's about 300 pages, so not a super thick book either. I think it's great. I think you should check it out. Next, I have an author that I would like to recommend. If you like lyrical writing, if you like magical realism, and you want a Turkish author who has a bunch of books that you can choose from, each with a different, very intriguing premise, then might I suggest you try picking up Elif Shafak. I've only read one book by her, but I do have several on my TBR. The book that I have read is this one. It's 10 minutes, 38 seconds in this strange world. This book is about a sex worker in Istanbul named Tequila Leila, and she is murdered. This again is the whole premise of the book. It is not a spoiler, but Layla She is murdered, but her brain remains active, like it still has electrical signals and it's still active for 10 minutes and 38 seconds after she is killed. And during that time, Layla is circling through her memories and the events of her life. Now, it's told partially from her perspective during this 10-minute, 30-second period, and it's told partially from the perspective of her 5 friends who, after she is murdered, are grieving her and trying to deal with the aftermath. To be honest, it's kind of like Martyr, where I don't remember this book super well. I don't think that I necessarily loved this book, but I really liked it. I think I did enjoy it enough to want to try more of her other books, but I have a feeling that I might enjoy one of the 2 books I'm going to talk about that are on my TBR more than this one. But I didn't dislike this book, and I would still recommend people try it out. I know a lot of people have really loved this one. The first of our 2 books that are on my TBR is Island of Missing Trees. This book is about the forbidden love story of, I think, a Turkish woman and a Greek man, or a Greek woman and a Turkish man. I can't remember exactly. But what is really interesting about this book is that it is told partially from the point of view of a tree. There's a fig tree that witnesses their relationship, and it is narrating to you their love story. I think later on in the story we switch to the point of view of their daughter, but I'm just so particularly interested in the point of view of the tree. That just sounds so bizarre and cool. The other book that I want to read by her, I think, is her newest or newer book, and it is called Rivers in the Sky, or There Are Rivers in the Sky, something like that. Rivers in the Sky. And this is another book with a magical realism element, and in this one, the real magical realism element is a drop of water. This story follows 3 different characters who live in different time periods and different places. I think they live in London and Turkey at different periods of time, and they're all connected somehow. Their stories are somehow connected by a single drop of water. Again, sounds bizarre, but also sounds like it could be right up my alley, so I'm very excited to pick up these 2 books. And I feel like even though I enjoyed 10 minutes and 38 seconds in The Strange World, I feel like one of these might end up being my new favorite. Surely there was no way that I was going to talk about my favorite books from Southwest Asian authors without talking about one of my favorite authors of all time. Listen, if you want a blend of fantasy and sci-fi with a fairy tale like quality that has extremely expressive and emotive and sensory and poetic language full of metaphors and very emotional turns of phrases, then you simply must pick up Amal El-Mohtar. This is not up for debate, you have to do it. Amal is a Lebanese Canadian author, and Amal is an author that you pick up if you are in it for the full body emotional physical experience of reading a book. She is someone you pick up because you want to feel something. She is not someone you pick up because you want to get into the weeds of plot points, or someone you pick up because you really want to get into the nitty-gritty of world building or magic mechanics. That's not what she's about. If that sounds good to you, I highly recommend the 2 books of hers that I have read. This is How You Lose the Time War, which she co-wrote with Max Gladstone, and The River Has Roots. This is How You Lose the Time War is this crazy, fantastical sci-fi purple prose sapphic love story. This follows 2 agents who are on opposite sides of this crazy time-space war, and they're both leaving letters to each other across time and space in these very unconventional manners, and they fall in love with each other over the course of these letters. And it's so bizarre, and it's definitely a book that you have to be willing to kind of let go of things like specific world building or mechanics. You have to just get swept up in the writing and the purple prose and the drama and the yearning. It's definitely one of those things that if you're going to be nitpicky about the dramatics, and it probably isn't going to work for you, which is funny because I usually am like that, but something about this book really worked for me, and I think it is very much due to Amal's beautiful writing, and also shout out to Max Gladstone, did a great job. The other book of hers that I've read and absolutely love is The River Has Roots. This one is the story of 2 sisters who live in a world where grammar is magic, or magic is grammar. It's really bizarre, and it's such a beautiful fairy tale, fable-like story where, once again, it's very atmospheric, and things like the specifics of world building and magic, those aren't the points. You are here to feel something, to be swept away in the magic of the experience of reading this book. If you can, I highly recommend you do this book as an immersive read. So do both the audiobook and the physical read, because for the audiobook they're singing, and Amal and her sister actually recorded instrumental music for the soundtrack, and it's so beautiful. But I also recommend you do the physical book because look, there are such beautiful illustrations all throughout the book. Like, it's not just one or two. Like as you go through, you keep seeing these illustrations that tie into the story. So I just highly recommend you give both of them a shot because they are both an experience. But this is what I mean. Amal, whether it's her audiobooks or it's her physical books, I think she really cares about this full body experience that her readers are having. So she likes things like illustrations, or she likes things like music added, and ooh, I love her for it. Her most recent release, which I have mentioned and is on my TBR, is Seasons of Glass and Iron. This just dropped a couple months ago, and I have heard only good things about it. I've heard only good things about it. I've seen people who I'm friends with on Instagram rave about it, cry about it, and I'm so excited to get to this. This is a collection of short stories that I think all have some element of magic or fantasy or fairy tale-esque things in them. I really don't know, and I don't think I care because I'm just so confident that I'm going to read this and absolutely fall in love. I cannot wait to get to it, and I'm going to be doing it as a buddy read over on Instagram. So as soon as that's all set up and our schedules align, I am going to be weeping over this. I am positive. All right, now I want to talk about some books I have on my TBR representative of authors from Southwest Asia. The first book I want to talk about is a debut novel, and I feel like I've talked about a bunch of debuts in this video, but that's beside the point. The book I want to talk about is Our Cut of Salt by Dina Helm. Listen to me, I am so excited for this book. I want this book in my hands like yesterday. This is going to be a horror novel that follows 3 generations of Palestinian women who are haunted in their family ancestral home in Haifa. One of those women, Marina, ends up discovering these secrets in this house, and I love the idea of a haunted house as this tangible physical representation of the Palestinian experience of displacement, of trauma, of being colonized and occupied. It's been described as this eerie and lyrical reimagining of the classic haunted house trope, and it ties in issues of real world occupation and injustice. And I think that's such a cool idea. I think that colonization, occupation, that is such a physical and emotional type of oppression, and I'm excited to see how it gets translated into the haunted house trope. It kind of makes me think of the premise of Model Home by River Solomon, which I think it's right here. It's also supposed to be a reimagining of the haunted house trope that I think incorporates racism in the US. But yeah, I'm so excited for Our Cut of Salt. I think that it has the potential to just really F me up. And I love this type of horror where horror and supernatural elements are integrated into or used as a vehicle to talk about historical horror or real life current day issues of racism and things like that. So I feel like I'm gonna love this. Cannot freaking wait. Next author that I want to check out is, I believe, an Iranian woman who was born in Turkey, and that is Maryan Kamali. She has 2 books that I'm interested in. One is The Stationery Shop and the other is The Lion Women of Tehran. Now, The Stationery Shop, I believe this is a love story. It's a love story that's either interrupted by or has to struggle through an era of political turmoil. I think that this is going to be adapted into a TV show or a movie or something, but I would like to read this one. The Lion Women of Tehran, I have no idea what it's about, but that title is so hard. I'm convinced just based on the title alone. I've never read anything by her, so if you have read Lion Women of Tehran or Stationery Shop, let me know what you thought. The last book that I'm going to be talking about on my TBR for this region, and actually the last book I'm going to talk about for this video, is called The Nights Are Quiet in Tehran. This is written by an Iranian-German author named Sida Bazyar. This was shortlisted for the Booker Prize. I can't remember if it was this year or last year, but it had gotten some amount of recognition. I don't know too much about this book, but I believe it's a family drama. It's supposed to be a book that spans several decades, and it's about this family who leaves and eventually returns to Iran. Even though it was shortlisted for the Booker Prize, I feel like I haven't heard too many people talk about it, so yeah, I don't know very much, but it is definitely one that I want to pick up. Okay, everyone, it has been at the cost of my voice because I can feel me losing my voice, but I have managed to get through all the books that I wanted to talk about today, representative of East Asia and Southwest Asia. These have been books that I have loved, these have been books that I like and think other people might love, and these have been books that I am eager to get to. This is not at all an exhaustive list of the books that I've read and enjoyed from these regions, so I apologize again if I didn't get to your country or give you a specific book from your country. I am but one person and I'm just not God's strongest soldier, so I didn't make it to them in this video, but I'm hoping that, over over the course of this channel and as I continue to read books, I will be able to highlight all of these countries at some point. I feel like I've said this 1,000 times, but I would love to hear from you in the comments and hear what your favorite books from any of these regions are, or any books that you would recommend by AANHPI authors, whether I've talked about them or not. If it's a country I have talked about or haven't, just let me know in the comments. I would love to get recommendations. I am literally always adding to my TBR. It is a curse and a burden and a joy. So yeah, I would love to hear your recommendations. I hope that these 2 videos were helpful and that you were able to pick up a couple titles that you're interested in reading. If you are going to read anything that I recommended, let me know what they are. Thank you so much to all of you who managed to get through this entire video and are meeting me here at the end. As always, I appreciate you so very much. I am so grateful for every single one of you who listens to me ramble. I'm wishing you lots of joy and rest and happy reading until I see you in the next video. Bye. Now I'm gonna recommend 2 books that are all. Now I'm gonna recommend. Girl. Okay.